Hello and welcome to a new edition of True Audiophiles. Today I'm going to actually do a little bit of an update on my two sound quality shootouts that I did. I did one for Van Halen 1 when the new Van Halen self-titled One Step came out. And I also did a sound quality shootout for Van Halen 2 when that new One Step came out. Big reason for the update here is because I ended up buying the Chris Bellman cuts from 2015 because I hadn't previously had them. And I had heard a lot of great things about them, and some people felt that that was better than the versions of the One Steps, I should say, that were out there. So I wanted to kind of judge for myself and give you guys my take, tell you what I felt were the differences between them, and kind of let you guys decide what you think, and I'll give you my opinion on what my preferences are. So that's basically where I'm at for today's video. So like I said, so I have a One Step for the Van Halen 2, and then I have purchased, as I'd mentioned, the Chris Bellman cut version of Van Halen 2, and same thing goes for the first Van Halen album. This is my One Step of the first Van Halen album. And then this is the Chris Bellman cut. So I will say that right off the bat that the Chris Bellman cuts both sound spectacular. I can certainly see why people would like both of them and why they may even prefer them over the Mofis. So first run, I will give you my take on the first Van Halen, and I'll probably set a video up and give you a link, I should say, to my original sound quality shootout that I did to kind of let you know kind of my thoughts on, my original thoughts, I should say, on the Mofi for the first Van Halen. So listen to the Chris Bellman cut. I thought it sounded great, good, even, natural tone to it. You know, relatively quiet vinyl, and overall I thought it sounded pretty good. You know, had a decent bass, you know, nothing earth-shattering or over the top, which, you know, for some that's spectacular. But then I put on the Mobile Fidelity One Step, and I would say the differences between the two are relatively subtle, but they are very noticeable still. But basically, I would say with the Chris Bellman cut, you get more mid-range, and that kind of shows up in the vocals and the cymbals. Cymbals probably sound a touch more natural on the Chris Bellman cut comparison to the Mofi One Step, but I would definitely give the clear edge to the One Step in the bass department. It definitely had better bass and more bass. And it just, you know, gave you that little extra oomph, which is what I really am looking for personally when I listen to these things. I really like hearing the bass drum especially. So the One Step was also noticeably cut louder, and that's, you know, most likely just because it's a 45 RPM, so they can do that. So overall, I would say this. I still, you know, if you're wanting probably the more neutral tone overall, I could see you wanting to reach for the Chris Bellman, and it's certainly significantly cheaper, so that's an added bonus because it's still available out there. But one of the things that you get with the Mobile Fidelity, besides the more bass, which I prefer, you also get that more 3D soundstage, kind of the air between the instruments thing, and it's relatively subtle. And you know, if you're not listening to a system in the sweet spot, you know, with a system set up really well and speaker placement just right, you know, that might not be something that you're going to really be able to notice as much or at all in comparison to the two. So, guess it's all what you're looking for. You know, if that last part is not something that you look for or that you care about or that you notice, the Chris Bellman by far is the best value. You know, you're going to get a great sounding record, and it's going to be good quality pressing, you know, pretty quiet overall, not quite as quiet as the super vinyl from Mofi, But, if you're wanting kind of that more oomph, the especially in the bass, where you can kind of feel the bass, I would definitely, and you want that 3D sound stage, the more air between the instruments, things like that. The One Step is definitely the one for you. And that comes to the self-titled. Now, when it comes to the Van Halen 2 releases, the one gripe that I had, or there were two gripes that I have with the Van Halen 2. The one, I thought it was probably a hair brighter than it should have been. It really helped in some cases, and I'll explain that a little bit, especially when I do the compare here later. But where I think it personally could have potentially hurt it in certain circumstances when playing it on a certain gear is it definitely had some sibilance going on. At least on my system I heard it, and it was really bad on the song Light Up the Sky during the drum interlude in the middle, where there's a lot of hi-hat going on. So, but anyway, so I listened to the Bellman take, and I'd say, overall the Bellman take was really, really good. Definitely didn't have quite as much treble as the Mofi one, which for some that's great. I feel it probably had a little bit more treble than the early pressing and the Japanese pressing that I had. And again, I'll put a link to the shootout that I had for that. But it definitely didn't have as much of the mobile fidelity. And it definitely had a little bit more mid-bass, kind of that more punchy bass for the bass drum is where that really shows up well. So it definitely was improvement in that. I preferred that personally over the mobile fidelity. The mobile fidelity had good deep bass, but it didn't have that punchy bass that I got with the Chris Bellman cut. Chris Bellman cut was definitely a little bit noisier than the Super Vinyl, but that's to be expected. And the Mofi definitely still had that better 3D soundstage that the Chris Bellman kind of lacks a little bit. Don't get me wrong, the Chris Bellman one still has great soundstage, still has good placement of the instruments on the soundstage, but the Mofi just kind of took it to that next level. And, I would definitely say that I felt that the bass guitar sounded a little bit better on the One Step, but at the sacrifice of, having too much brightness, because I think the brightness kind of helped the bass guitar quite a bit on the mobile fidelity. So the Chris Bellman, again, was definitely a little bit noisier, but the Mofi was great because of the Super Vinyl. And, it's one of those things where they both have their qualities that are great. And going back to what I was talking about again with the first Van Halen album, you're talking about $25-$30 for the Chris Bellman cut as opposed to, $125 for the Van Halen 2 on One Step or Van Halen. So when you're talking about that, the Chris Bellman cut is by far the biggest bang for your buck and best bang for your buck. I actually think that I do prefer, in this particular case, the Van Halen 2 on Chris Bellman as opposed to the Mofi. And I think I still would feel that way even if I didn't have the sibilance. Just because I think the EQ is better. I got that kind of punchiness in the bass that I didn't get with the One Step, which I got on the One Step of the first album, surprisingly enough. So I think if I could have the combination of the two where I could get the EQ of the Chris Bellman with the soundstage of the Mofi without the sibilance, it would be just a clear-cut winner. So I guess you got to pick your poison, and maybe for a lot of you that are watching this, you maybe don't have a super bright system, so it's not going to seem as bright to you, and maybe you don't have the issues or won't have the issues with sibilance that I had. I also will let you know that I did try to play it on one of my other turntables, on one of my other systems. It's not really set up real well to be, a great listening environment or anything like that. It's just kind of in our, our living room with just a couple of bookshelf speakers on some bookshelves up against the wall, and a relatively inexpensive vintage turntable / cartridge system, not anywhere near the quality of this. It didn't seem like there was much, if any, sibilance. There probably was still a little bit, but it wasn't anywhere near as noticeable as it was on this system. But I think that would lead more towards, I think, because of the fact I'm listening in the sweet spot and I've got all the system set up really well and tweaked down here where I don't really have that up there. So take that for what you will. I think I still heard it, but it just wasn't anywhere near as obvious as it was on my better system. So that is kind of my take. So, brief summary. I personally prefer the self-titled Mofi One Step compared to the Bellman, although the Bellman's very good. I preferred the Bellman cut of Van Halen 2 compared to the One Step. So, would love to hear your take. I know I've read some of your takes on both of the comments of the videos that I made previously, but I'd love to get your feedback as to what you think about what I've just talked about here. So, if you liked this video, please hit that like button. And I want to thank you for subscribing. If you do subscribe, if you don't, please do so. And, hit that alert bell. Let you know when my new videos come out. And, again, make some comments below if you want to. So, that's everything I've got for this episode. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Thanks a lot.